Morning. Welcome to the Graduation Equity Webinar Series. I'm Kathy Anderson. I'm an Assistant Director of Early Warning Systems, and today we are talking about harassment, intimidation, and bullying, preventative classroom behavior support strategies. This meeting is being recorded and it should be available in the next couple of days on YouTube. We also have closed captions if you want to take advantage of that. We'll be sharing our PowerPoint throughout the webinar, but it's also posted on our page if you want to check it out. This webinar is brought to you through OSPI's Office of Student Engagement and Support. At OSPI, we believe each student needs to be prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagements. Our series is aiming to spotlight strategies for enhancing educational access and graduation. Through our webinars, we want to think critically and have an opportunity today to get curious about ineffective policies. Ultimately, our goal is to ensure that every student gets the instruction and the timely support that they need for academic lifelong success. I'd like to share with you this photo from the Squaxin Island Canoe Journey from this past summer. The fall's my favorite time of year with all the colorful leaves and getting to see the harvest come in. And we invite you all to honor the traditional land on which each of you are located today. We have some links on our resource sheet you can use if you're not sure yet where you're at. In my life, I mostly travel around the intersection of the traditional lands of the Squaxin, Coast Salish, Powlett, and Nisqually tribes. And I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial and who still live here today. We live in such a beautiful place. I want to encourage you to visit your local tribes and learn more about tribal consultation. Building relationships with tribes benefits students and their families, and if you'd like to know more about it, we'd love to connect you with our Office of Native Education. We chose this topic because who feels safe at school is always an equity issue. And creating a safe environment is a prerequisite to learning. Nobody can really learn well when they don't feel safe. We know that students from minority groups are more likely to experience harassment, intimidation, and bullying, and that there are strategies that we can use as educators that are going to support positive and welcoming environment for everyone. Harassment, intimidation, and bullying can make school staff uncomfortable, especially if they don't know how to take proactive steps to build and maintain positive relationships or how to repair when something goes wrong. So today we're hoping that we will get a chance to share some strategies with you and support you in this. So today in our webinar, we want to support you in understanding what harassment, intimidation, and bullying is, and provide you with new student handbook language that you're now required to include. And we hope you'll understand that school culture is a bullying prevention strategy. We'll walk through some common harassment, intimidation, and bullying scenarios and ways that an educator might support the prevention, and also thinking about what that looks like at a school level. We'll share some data around protected classes and discriminatory harassment in Washington and requirements for investigation. And we also have some teacher training prevention strategies and ways to proactively support parents in reporting and addressing harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Our presenters today include Caroline Todd, She is our OSPI Student Safety and Belonging Program Specialist. And we also have with us Eric Landers, who's an Associate Professor of Elementary and Special Education for Georgia Southern University. We like to know who is in our webinar, so we are going to run a poll and check out who is here. We love to know your role, what grade band that you teach or are most familiar with, and how familiar you are with the topic. And I see people with hands raised. We do have a Q&A function, and we also have our chat poll. I'm going to check in with the chat while this poll is running. Well, you'll see the slides are in there. And we also have our resource sheet. So if you're interested in any of the links that we're sharing, those are going to be in our resource sheet as well. So I'm seeing lots of different school districts represented here and lots of tribes too. Welcome, good morning. If you didn't get a chance to be in on the poll, that's okay. We're gonna just see where we're at for this morning. Looks like we've got lots of school counselors. We've got a good amount of administrators, district office folks, lots of middle and high school in here. And there's people seem very familiar with this topic. The most are probably not somewhat familiar. So you guys can see the results there if you'd like as well. So first up, we're going to go to Caroline. And happy birthday, Caroline. Caroline is spending her birthday with us. So thank you for that. And Caroline, tell us more about what's going on at OSPI.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, everybody. My name is Caroline Tom. I'm the Student Safety and Belonging Program Supervisor. I support the Student Safety Center at OSPI, and I get a focus on all things harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Just for the purpose of this presentation, I may be referring to harassment, intimidation, and bullying as HIB. So as we know, all behavior is communication. Bullying behaviors may be communicating an expression of power, signaling insecurity, or seeking attention. All behavior is also an attempt to meet a need, whether it is basic needs, psychological needs, or emotional needs. These needs could include a need for control, social acceptance, or an emotional outlet. Behaviors may also be an attempt to avoid something, such as perceived vulnerability or embarrassment. Students may also be avoiding areas they may not feel confident in. In other words, this may be like a sign of a lagging skill area. They may not be exhibiting behaviors with intentional malice, but because they have not developed those skills yet, and they're exhibiting unwanted behaviors to communicate or meet a need. This can reframe our understanding of unwanted behavior and establishes hope that these behaviors will improve with just some intentional teaching and skill development. So these skill areas could include executive function, language processing, emotional regulation, cognitive flexibility, and social interaction. So by viewing behavior through this lens, we can better understand and respond to the needs of others, fostering more compassionate and effective interaction. So as kids are growing and developing, there are a lot of intense changes that are happening while their little brains are still far from fully developing. I'm not sure if anyone else just remembers how intense and confusing it was trying to navigate life throughout those years of development. Emotions feel like incredibly overwhelming and often too painful to process. especially if you feel like you need to process those emotions alone. And as I'm sure many of us are aware, the frontal lobe plays a very critical part in our development and ability to socialize. So I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with the answer, but at what age is the frontal lobe fully developed? So if you have an answer, you can pop it into the chat. Yeah, so around your mid to late 20s is the age where it fully develops. So as I worked with youth as a coach, mentor, and engagement specialist, I often needed to remind myself that kids only know what they've experienced. So we cannot just expect or assume that they will know what they have not yet known. While we control what students experience and while we can't control what students experience at home or with their peers outside of school or on social media, I think we can often expect students to just know better by a certain age. However, if they've not had the chance to experience what it is like to safely navigate their emotions with the guidance of healthy role models or know how to build up their confidence without tearing others down, it may be very difficult and may result to undesired behaviors. So the polyvagal theory just can help us further understand why certain behaviors occur. The polyvagal theory explains how our nervous system influences our behavior and emotional responses. It has two main components, our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight responses, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes our rest and digest functions. Now, the vagus nerve is a very crucial part to our parasympathetic nervous system. So when we feel safe and regulated, the vagus nerve helps us engage socially, communicate, and connect with others. However, when we perceive danger, the sympathetic nervous system takes over, preparing our fight or flight, freeze, or fawn response. This is incredibly important for understanding emotional regulation and having a trauma-informed lens when working with unwanted behaviors. Aggressive behaviors may occur during states of dysregulation and can be in response to feeling a lack of safety, which can disrupt their ability to connect positively with others. This is why it is very critical to create a safe space at school and support students and teach them how to recognize and manage their physiological responses to stress, which can help reduce behaviors of bullying. So as we are mindful of having a trauma-informed lens and practicing patience and empathy for students, it's also important to be mindful of the language we use to describe situations of bullying. Using definitive language such as like bully and victim can be very harmful to identity language. A student may exhibit bullying-like behavior, but it does not define them as who they are. And the same goes for students who are being labeled as victim as well, as it does not empower their sense of self. Instead, it is very important that we use terms like targeted aggressor or reported aggressor and targeted student. Bullying can be very subjective when we talk about perception versus reality and intent versus impact. Intent is about the reported aggressor's perception of their actions, while impact is about how the targeted student experiences actions. While intent can provide context, it does not excuse the behavior, and the impact is really what we need to be focusing on. By teaching the difference of intent versus impact, it can help foster greater empathy and understanding. So not all unwanted behavior is HIB. There is a state established definition for harassment, intimidation, and bullying that schools must use when investigating reports of HIB. It is also important to note that there are frequent overlaps with discriminatory harassment and HIB, since discriminatory harassment specifically targets individuals based on protected characteristics like race, gender, or disability. Not all cases of HIB may meet the threshold. Since discriminatory harassment falls under anti-discrimination laws and can lead to legal consequences if it creates a hostile environment. So as we consider, there we go. So we know this topic feels very overwhelming in our state and across the country. Looking at the total number of OSPI Safety Center calls and emails that were received last year from schools and families seeking information and support. Out of the 674 calls or emails, about 1/3 of those were related to harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And as we consider the brain science and developmental milestones, it's no surprise that bullying behaviors are experienced most in middle school. And as the students will further develop and ideally gain those critical skills that we spoke about earlier, we see a significant decline in students reporting being bullied in the last month. So the data also highlights that by the 8th grade, 3/4 of students know how to report bullying when it occurs, which is incredibly positive. But with that in mind, we were also interested to see the same students report that only half of them felt that staff tried to intervene and stop bullying when it occurred. So although the data does not give us the answers, it does give us opportunity to ask some questions. So what is leading to students' perception? Do they feel staff are not responding to observed behaviors, or is it that when a report is made, they feel as there was no follow-up? And it is now no surprise that cyberbullying is a major topic of concern, as access to social media has led to an increase in online HIB-related incidents. A common question is whether schools are allowed to respond or should respond to incidents that occur outside of school. However, if there is a nexus or connected impact between the incident outside of school and a student's engagement in school, the students have a right and responsibility to respond. So when staff receive a report, they have a duty to investigate, ensure the behavior stops, and work to establish a safe and positive learning environment for all students. Our goal in today's webinar is to highlight how this work can be done proactively and preventatively by understanding how and when common HIB behaviors occur and implementing best practices as Tier 1 supports. So for example, ensuring all staff, students, and families know how to report HIB ensures students know that this behavior is taken very seriously and that staff must respond. Another high leverage move for preventing cyberbullying may also providing families trainings on how to monitor their students' social media accounts and teaching them about known tricks that their students may be using, such as hiding fake accounts or other items. So there are a number of free prevention resources available to help staff with this work, such as stopbullying.gov, schoolsafety.gov, and pbis.org. There's also some helpful resources that schools can share with students who are experiencing bullying, where they can access 24/7 support, such as Hear Me WA and 988. So this may feel overwhelming, but school staff aren't doing this work alone. Every district has an identified compliance officer who is tasked with supporting HIB compliance requirements and investigations. If you're looking for your district's compliance officer information, it can be found on your district website at OSPI or the OSPI Harassment, Intimidation, and Bullying website. In addition, state level support is also always available. Every month, our school safety center team at OSPI collaborates with regional ESD partners to host open office hours for district staff. If you are interested in joining the calendar invitations, you can scan the QR code or email the School Safety Center at schoolsafety@k12.wa.us. So please let us know if you have any questions, and you can reach out at any time. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. And yeah, you'll want to check out those office hours. What a great opportunity to talk to some really knowledgeable people if you're having issues at school. So check those out. Next up, we're going to go to Eric. Eric is going to talk a little bit about the problem analysis triangle, and he's also going to share some of the strategies that he's found in his research over at Georgia Southern University.
Started my timer. I have 35 minutes. I got a lot of stuff to tell you. I won't spend too much time on myself. I'm Eric Landers. I'm Georgia Southern. I have a background in behavior and in teaching middle school and special ed. But I always start all of my presentations like this. A long time ago, I was given this definition of discipline. Discipline works when prevention creates more positive than negative consequences. Now, I always have a problem with that because everyone goes around saying, let's be positive with kids. That's not the point. In fact, I tell my teachers, I don't want you to be positive with kids. But before you click off of this, just, let me finish. The problem is discipline in most schools is based on reaction, bribery, and humiliation. We have to take that word positive out of our vocabulary and replace it with something else. If we look at discipline like this, discipline works when prevention creates more engagement than conflict. Ask any of your teachers what takes time away from their teaching, and they will say the problems in my classroom, the conflict. And if I can focus on prediction and prevention and not positive, prediction and prevention, that's what discipline is, then I can increase engagement in my classrooms. And guess what a byproduct of that is? You create relationships with kids, and that positive thing, it comes natural after you create effective discipline through prevention and prediction. So now that you understand how I approach discipline, let's talk about this topic of bullying. Now, I'm not going over this triangle because everyone already knows what it is. But on the academic side, we do things on the universal level, target level, and the individual level. The same has to go for bullying prevention. What are you going to teach all kids in your school? Then when you have a group of kids who identify themselves as being aggressive, what do you do with that group of kids to stop them from becoming that one kid that's becoming the major aggressor? And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we create a universal approach to this, to this problem? And then how do we start to look at these other individuals as they start to self-identify? Now, I do a lot of internet searches and I see this all the time. Okay, I see a lot of these. But who are these for? Let me ask you a question. Have you ever walked into a hallway and a kid sees that sign and they say, you know what? From here to here, I can't bully. This is a no bullying zone, right? That's not how this stuff works. These signs are put into schools to appease the adults on that come into our schools. And if this is the extent of how you address bullying, then we got a lot of work to do. So today, what I want to talk to you about is going beyond just saying, hey, stop that. But how do we look at a system, right? How do we look at our school and start to break that down and say, how do I make each part more effective? And I hope this is a way that you've never seen before. I hope this starts you thinking in new ways about how you can use your school to counteract bullying. Now, this is what's called the problem problem analysis triangle. See if I can get that out of my mouth. What you have on the inner side, inner triangle, is supposed to slide. It's stuck. There we go. On the inner triangle, you have to have all three of these components present to have a bullying situation in your school. On the outer circle triangle, these are all the supports that are available to us in our school to reduce the impact of bullying. Now, our goal is for our inner triangle, right, is to just take one of those things away. Because if you think about a triangle, if you take one side away, what happens to the other sides? It falls down, right? And so our goal is not to try to create this comprehensive thing and address everything we see, but guess what? If I can take away that target by empowering them with behaviors to stand up for themselves, then I've taken that away, right? If I can teach that aggressor new behaviors, right? Pro-social leadership behaviors, then I've taken the aggressor out of the equation. If I can take away the opportunity where it's happening, I've solved my problem. And so that's where we want to focus today. How do we take these different parts and take one of them away to break down the whole system? Now, as you look around the outside, we have all these people around us that are providing support. The advocates, the mentor, the place managers, these are the people we don't think about. And hopefully after today, you start to look around your school and go, that's an advocate, that's a place manager, that could be a mentor. And here's how we can use them. You ready for this journey? 30-minute journey that I got to do this in? I have so much to tell you. Hopefully we can spend more time together another time. First of all, let's look at the opportunity. The goal here is to identify and eliminate where it happens. For all you middle school teachers and counselors and administrators out there, I feel sorry for you. This is what happens in school, right? Bullying peaks in middle school and it sort of goes down in high school, but middle school is that place where kids are trying to figure themselves out. And if you know anything about human development, that's where they're trying to find themselves, right? And they don't really they don't know how to deal with rejection sometimes. They haven't experienced it. They don't know what to do when someone says, I don't like you anymore, right? And so they're figuring all these things out in their little brains. And so that's where it happens the most. I was a middle school teacher and I had hair when I started teaching, but you can see how I look now. But as we look at a school, here's your school, right? Why do we have opportunity in a school? The one reason that we have opportunities is we have poorly informed place managers, the people who control the areas in our school. Now, that's because there's some lack of understanding about what bullying is when they see it. Sometimes they can't distinguish what that is when they're actually looking at it. And the worst part is sometimes they fail to intervene because sometimes it's just look as kids just growing up. And that's true. Some behaviors is kids just growing up. But when it becomes repetitive and harmful to someone else, that's when it's not that anymore, right? And so as I look at this, the key to combating awareness in schools is awareness. How do we make everybody in our school aware of our goals and what behaviors to look for so that we're all looking for the same thing, right? There are two types of data you need to take if you're looking to combat bullying. The first one is discipline data. All of us take that, okay? And I want you to understand what type of discipline data you should be looking for. I have two daughters, right? And I use them all the time in examples when I speak. I don't mind if they deal with growing up behaviors. Why? Because it makes them stronger young women in having to understand how to deal with conflict in their life, right? What I don't want them to experience is that red behavior there, that bullying behavior that causes them harm. And so what we have to do is kids are going to fight and call each other names. But what we have to do in a school is figure out what are those bullying-like behaviors that are starting to become repetitive, that are starting to show themselves more often, to say, how do we identify those patterns, right? So that we can implement the proper intervention for that kid to say, this is not the right path. This is a different behavior you could be engaging in. So I suggest schools take two types of data. The first type of data is ODR. Everyone takes it. That's office discipline referrals, right? But the second type you should be taking is minor incident reports. Minor incident reports actually show us the smaller patterns of behaviors in schools. The rule with minor incident reports, if I have to change the academic or social setting of a kid, that's something I should note. Let me say that again. If I had to change the academic or social setting of a kid, that's something I should note. So if I had to change that kid away from a social setting because they're calling each other names once, okay, but what about 10 times? What about 15 times? Right? And we have those situations where kids do that over the course of a semester, but if we're not taking minor incident reports, you can't establish those patterns that show us those aggressive like behaviors that we can intervene early. So we have to take the appropriate school-wide data. The second type of data you have to take is student data. I love this data because it is the perception of the kids in your school, right? Who knows where they are hurting the most than the kids in your school? They know more about what's happening in the underbelly of your school than most of your teachers do. They are aware of what motivates kids there. And by gathering this information, we can start planning from their perception where they're hurting. My question here is, when's the last time you looked at a kid or a group of kids and said, tell me where you feel unsafe? Tell me where you are scared to go in my building, right? And that's when we start to look at our discipline data and our student data and start to understand the patterns that are happening in our school. Now, this is a free survey that I'll give you a link to later. Don't worry about writing it down. We don't have much time right now. But I developed this survey several years ago, 11 aspects of bullying, 15 questions at Skip Logic. We take all of this different data from a student perception, and then we start to look at, are the aggressors in the school older, younger? Are they of different race? Where are they doing it? All of these things play into building patterns in our schools. But I like to say this, data poses questions. It does not give you answers. So that means that you have to look and say, how do I use this data to answer the questions in my school? Now, on a basic level, data can give you awareness, who, what, where. But if I really want to solve problems and predict effective discipline, I start to have conversations around why. And when I start to have conversations around why, I start to identify the areas, the groups, what social skills instructions that I need that will intervene, right, in this real world situation in my school. I'll share this with you later again, but it's an interest form for the free survey online. The second thing that you have to look for, once you identify opportunity, you have to identify the place managers. Now, let me ask you a question. Where are the place managers in your school? Right? That's the owner of that location. Most people just think of teachers, administrators, right? But what about the coaches, the cafeteria workers, the custodians, even your bus drivers? You know, several years ago, there was a survey done for cafeteria workers. And cafeteria workers said, I want to intervene, but I don't know how. I don't know if I can, right? And so if we look at bullying in a national level, in 2022, 49 million kids were in our school, basically, and 19% of them reported being bullied. That's 9.4 million kids in our school. And what I know is only about 50 to 60% of them actually report that they're being bullied. So if we look at our school, our nation, where do we start to engage people? Who are these people in our schools that we can turn around and empower to own their area by doing what? Oh, no, I went the wrong way. First of all, we have to train them. Let me ask you a question. When's the last time you trained your cafeteria workers to identify bullying? Your custodians. When's the last time you gave these folks data for their specific area? Cafeteria workers, here is the data I'm getting from my lunchroom to show all the aggression. How can we work together to solve that? And then give them a voice to say, when I see it, I know how to report it and I know how to deal with it. You have to strengthen your place managers. Number two, you have to look at your targets. How do I start to look at a target and support them from an adult standpoint? Currently, there's too much emphasis on adults stopping bullying and not students. We have to give kids the skills to stand up for themselves, because I can't stand next to my daughters their whole life, right? I have to give them the skills to say, that's not right, and I'm not going to accept it. And so how do we do that from an adult perspective? How do we support victims in our school? I shouldn't have used that word. I was told not to, but a new one, targets, right? Through skill development. That's what we have to start looking at. So I have to give them the right knowledge. What is okay? What is not okay? Give them examples of bullying in my particular context. Guess what? Bullying in South Georgia, where I live, may look a little different than what it is right there. We may call it something different. So we can't just use these words, bullying. What are they using? We got to give them the right attitude, which means pure acceptance is not necessary. It's okay when kids don't like each other. It's okay if someone doesn't want to play with each other, because not everyone's going to like each other. Schools are hotbeds of conflict. I want you to think about it. A school is where everybody in my community comes together in one place, right? And so all these different beliefs, all these different religions, the way people raise each other, right? They're all in one building and we're saying get along. Well, guess what? That's not always going to happen, right? And so we have to say, if someone doesn't like each other, that's okay. But if you're going to say that, you need to teach them conflict resolution skills. They have to understand, how do I deal with this emotion when someone says, I don't want to play with you? And that's okay. You know why? Because those are adult skills. Then we got to give them the behaviors to report. I'm going to challenge you to teach your students two things. First of all, teach them the difference between what is rude, mean behavior, conflict, and bullying. I'm okay with 1, 2, and 3. Rude, mean, conflict. That builds character, right? I'm not okay with bullying. That's harmful. And so what we have to do is teach kids the difference between these 4 behaviors and say, here's how we deal with each one of them. Second one, I challenge you to teach them problem-solving skills. I noticed there are mostly counselors in this room. Counselors, you are trained in this. How do we take this 7-step process and talk to a kid about, you're seeing bullying? Here's how you deal with it. Here's how you identify it. Here's how you come up with your own solutions, and then come talk to me about it. Let's try them out so that when you see this situation, you're not scared to try something different, right? And so if we give them these skills, we empower them, right, to take that target away from my triangle and the rest of it falls down. We have to empower advocates in our school. Guess what? Everyone in this room right now are advocates. It's just, how are we going to support our kids? There are 2 types of advocates in our school. There are the formal ones, teachers, and there's the informal ones, which are the students. I rarely read slides to you, but this is very important because I want you to understand it very clearly. The higher degree of anti-bullying attitudes in a setting, school or the classroom, the more likely students will engage in defending behaviors. That means standing up for each other. That tells me that we as adults have the responsibility to create environments where our kids feel safe in standing up when other kids are being hurt. That's what we have to do. We have to create that environment around them that they're not fearful to do that. Let me ask you a question. I just showed you this data. 39% of bullying instances in 2022 happened in the classroom in front of our teachers. How do we teach teachers to create an environment that kids feel safe to report and stand up for each other? What's the difference between a defender and a bystander in my school? Social self-efficacy. The belief that if I do something, it's going to make a difference. And that's where we come in. I'm going to give you 3 levels of support: school-wide, classroom, and individual. In our school-wide support, we have to teach a basic behavioral curriculum to everybody in our school. If you're implementing positive behavior support, preventative behavior support, right, this is all embedded in your school-wide expectations. Not just how to walk down the hallway, but now you have to start to define, how are we supposed to treat each other? When you use that word respect in your matrix, how have you defined that word respect so that it encompasses relationships in our school? How we treat each other, how children are supposed to talk to each other, right? That's where we create the school-wide expectation for how people treat each other in our school. But teaching, it's more than just telling, guys. If I'm teaching 2 + 2, am I going to teach it like this? 2 + 2 is not 1, it's not 2, not 3, it's not 5. How far can I go with that? I can go forever. So why do I teach behavior skills like this? Stop doing this, stop biting, stop talking to each other like that. Or even functional skills. Don't leave trash behind, etc. Teaching is more than just telling. See, if I'm going to teach a skill, I'm going to say 2 + 2 is 4. I'm going to do everything that I can to show that kid what 4 means. Behavioral skills. Why don't I do the same thing? I have to show them what that means. I have to show them what respect among 2 people mean, right? And I'm going to get sued for this one day, I promise you. But teaching is more than just telling. We have to go beyond the Chris Tucker approach to teaching. Do you know what that is? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? How many times we spoke at kids and we had to tell them what to do, but we haven't shown them what to do. And so if I'm effectively going to teach skills, right, I'm going to define that simply for kids. And then guess what? I'm going to model and practice with that with positive and negative examples. I'm never going to let the kid practice the negative. Never do that. But I'm going to show them if it's school-wide respect and the way that we're supposed to treat each other, right? I'm going to show them this is how we talk to each other. This is how we do this. And then I'm going to monitor and acknowledge that, right? And when I see a kid not getting it, I'm not going to beat them down. I'm going to say, maybe I didn't teach it right. Maybe I just spoke at you and I didn't show you. So let me show you what this means. There's a good curriculum that you can use from pbis.org. Go to it. There's a middle school, high school. There's now a high school one, and there's an elementary school. Go to pbis.org, search bullying prevention. You can download it. It fits right into your PBIS curriculum. Classroom support. I'll give you a strategy here. If it's our responsibility to create this environment where kids feel safe talking about these things, right? Then I have to have conversations on a regular basis, not just October, but on a regular basis about what does bullying look like? What does kids getting hurt look like in my environment? So there's a neat little thing from pacer.org. You can do above the line, below the line. So it's a conversation. It's just, that's what it is. It doesn't have to be this. I just want teachers to talk to kids about what they're dealing with in their classrooms, right? So this is like, tell me what good friendship skills are in our school. We write it all down. Tell them what not friendship skills are. And then we have conversations with kids about how do we take below the line behaviors and start to make them above the line behaviors. And this is nothing special. This is just creating a conversation with kids to show them it's okay to talk about this. Individual support. We got to give them a place to go. And I know that most of you guys are counselors in here, but it doesn't always have to be to you. How do we create these spaces for kids to go to say, guess what? Something's happening to me. An easily accessible place. I used to give these stickers out, and it was to adults that says, be that person that kids go to talk to in your school when they're being bullied, right? And so how do we create them a place to go to say, when they're hurting, I can go talk to this person, not just the counselor. Counselor is always a resource, but I know that counselors have a tremendous amount of work on their plate. And so how do I create more avenues in my schools to provide the support that these kids need? Let me show you one. You already do it. Why not use check-in, check-out for a kid that is identified as a target? Just think about it. They come in the morning, check in with an adult, talk about how they feel, their fears, what they're looking forward to that day. And that adult gives them some sort of assurance. This is what you can do to make it different today. And at the end of the day, they come and talk about it. Check in, check out doesn't have to be for kids who are not following the rules. It could be added as a support measure for kids who are targeted. I have 9 minutes. I'm doing very well, guys. What do we do with the aggressors, right? That's always a question. Everybody behaves for a certain reason. Caroline said that earlier. You learn behavior. You do that, right? I'm going to prove that you learn behavior with one question. Are you ready? How many of you know how to piss off your significant other right now? Because you've done it, right? And you got the response that you wanted. And then you put that in your back pocket and you said, I'm going to use that again later. Well, guess what? Kids do the same thing. For an aggressive student, right? That's power. Power over others. And where does that power come from? That power comes from social situations. That's where they get all of their reinforcement from. Now, if we're talking about the social structure bullying, which is a completely different lecture, but there's all these different people that add power to this situation. And so the only way to make bullying ineffective for that person who is aggressive is you have to take away those social situations. I am not an advocate whatsoever of sending kids home unless there's a safety issue, and then we have to talk about some other things. But if I send a kid home, there's no teaching going on. And so how do I figure out how to keep them in my building, but then make the behavior they want to do ineffective and make the behavior I want them to do more effective? Well, if I'm going to make it ineffective for an aggressive student with bullying-like behaviors, then I'm going to take away those social situations, whatever they are. And then I'm going to be very honest with that kid, because guess what? Bullies or aggressors are intelligent kids. They're manipulators. They know what they're doing. most of the time they're your popular kids, right? And so I'll tell a kid, if you ever want to kiss your girlfriend between class ever again, then you need to stop treating other people this way. And I'm watching. We have to identify mentors. These are the people who can teach an aggressive student more pro-social behaviors. Because if you think about what's happening, there's a whole organization to bullying. Basically, bullies engage in antisocial leadership. And so what we have to do is teach kids how to engage in pro-social leadership, which means they need a strong mentor to show them and be honest with them about how to do this. So at the core, there's all this talk about teaching kids empathy, things like that, and we can get into that later on if you want. But for the purpose of this conversation, aggressive students who engage in bullying-like behaviors are natural leaders. They know what they're doing, and so you can't beat that out of a kid. Why would I want to do that? Because if they're natural leaders, how can I use that skill to benefit me and our school? So we have to teach them different behaviors. Guess what? That's easy to do too. And there's a system you already have that you can do that with. Imagine check in, check out. Identify an aggressive student with a pattern of bullying-like behaviors. I assign them to a pro-social leadership, strong person. And every morning they check in with this person, and this person says, how are we going to behave differently today? What did you say to this person yesterday that was out of bounds? How could I have said that differently? I understand that you feel a certain way about this, but here's another way to conduct yourself. And so if we don't have to create a whole bunch of new structures in our school to deal with this issue. We can use the ones that we have more effectively and efficiently. They told me 35 minutes. And so I got to it in 31, which yay for me. But there's so much more I wish I could tell you. And hopefully we get to spend some more time together, because there are so many different things we can do as adults to support the targets in our school, but also the aggressors to change their behaviors. Because what I know, and I'll leave you with this, what I know is if you don't change what's happening to a target, right? There's a lot of negative things there: depression, suicide, not eating, not sleeping. But what I also know, if you don't intervene with an aggressor, that kid's more likely to be involved in the juvenile justice system, abuse alcohol, abuse drugs. So you can't leave these guys just to focus on these guys. You have to focus on all of them. All right, I did it.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Everybody, let's give Eric a round of applause. Use your reaction buttons. And yeah, what a great talk, Eric. I feel like you've got some really great ideas there. If people have questions, we want to encourage you to use that Q&A, and we're going to check out some questions. And Anne, do you want to share with us? It looks like we've got a couple.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. We've got our first question here. Sometimes adults want to remove the opportunity to bully by reacting with inequitable solutions, like severely restricting restroom access to the point of violating Section 504, Title VI, along with WAC 246. 366A 125. They're identifying a location as a problem instead of trying to figure out why students want out of their classes, student perception data. How do adults have better conversations when they notice short-sighted solutions?
Well, I mean, I hear what you're saying about restricting access to certain areas. Now I would hope that if it is a bathroom situation or something like that, that we all know that everyone needs to be there at some point. It's just how do they get there? And so there's nothing wrong with saying, wait, we got to make sure it's clear. And then control that access, not take away, but control that access. Now, you bring up two questions here, really. You bring up the question of how do we not restrict them to the point of hurting them, but you're also asking the question why they want to leave, which could be a totally different question. It cannot even be about bullying. It could be about academics. It could be about engagement in your classroom. But more than likely, and we all know this, I think, most kids know exactly where to go in your school to get the access to what they want, right? And so they're using that. And that's kind of the point of taking those two levels of data, MIR, ODR, and then student perception data, because once you start to look at all this and ask the right questions, then you say, wait a minute, second block, blue hall bathroom, that's a hot spot. Where is the adult available in this time so that we can at least put eyes on it? Because I will tell you, 99% of the time, you put eyes on a kid, they will stop what they're doing. Now, I understand I was a special education teacher. Some kids don't care. Most kids do, right? And so if you can use that data to position your adults, and that's another whole activity that I normally do with that school map, saying, how do we use this data to position our adults to reduce the opportunity for kids in that building?
It looks like that's it for our Q&A for right now.
All right.
Thank you so much, Eric. And I think we're going to move on to our panel. And if you do have questions for Eric, feel free to keep putting them in the Q&A. Eric's going to stay with us too. Next part. So let's talk a little bit about how this works in our schools. So today we have with us Stacy Cho. Stacy is the compliance coordinator, truancy officer, the Title IX and harassment, intimidation, and bullying, and non-discrimination officer for the Issaquah School District. You have so many hats, Stacy. I'm so impressed with you. That is so much to do. And we also have with us Anthony Chocho, who is an assistant principal at Ridgeline Middle School and Yelm Community Schools. Welcome. Anthony has been an assistant principal there for 4 years. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the work that they've been doing. So I'm going to stop sharing. Let's start with Anthony. Anthony, you've been an assistant principal for the past 4 years in the same school, which is such an opportunity to build a culture. You talked a little bit about how you've worked with your principal and the staff to reinforce prevention. How has this work evolved at your school? What does that look like?
I was muted. Classic. All right. Thank you, everybody, for having me. I'm happy to be a part of this. And to answer your question, it really comes down to constant communication with not only my principal, but other staff in the building around what type of systems do we want in the building, what kind of cultures do we want in the building. And around that, once the systems are built and once that common vision is achieved, then it's just down to consistency. Running the systems consistently, always referring back to the systems. And you asked about the evolution of the system and the culture. It's really about that communication piece. Loved what Eric said around data, that it doesn't provide answers, but it actually poses questions. So always looking at data and always considering, all right, where do we need to shift? Where do we need to adjust? but bringing the whole team in when it comes to making those adjustments. And then I got to go back to it, the consistency. Having consistent responses and approaches to the issues are going to happen in the school, and after a few school years, you'll see that you're seeing the same types of issues over and over. They're not identical, but they follow a similar trend, and so making sure that we're responding consistently over time and making the adjustments together.
Yeah, the idea, like if you can predict it, you can prevent it, right? And putting that
course.
into practice is amazing. We also heard, okay, so originally, we heard from one of our staffers that an anti-bullying binder came home with them, with one of their students. And we're so curious about this as a strategy and how that's engaging parents and families as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. We tried out this physical resource, the binder that you're speaking of, a little while ago, and it went well. I mean, for us, it's just about many different ways to communicate the message, many different ways to strengthen our culture around kindness, positivity, and our restorative practices that we have here. So we do have physical resources like the binder you speak of that contains like snapshots of our handbook and ways that students can come reach out to us if they have issues. It's not only about bullying; it's about mental health resources and other SEL pieces that we believe students need access to. But that's just a physical piece of the bigger culture that we've been trying to establish and strengthen through the again, that teamwork and the consistency. And we have ways of communicating to kids in the commons. We have like a giant projector screen where we have messages to kids. We have, of course, the traditional announcements. We have the physical binder pieces. And then we have our tier 1 practices that we're pretty firm on in the classroom, as far as, hey, every kid should be receiving at least this foundation, this base package, if you will. And so our SEL, our SEL practices are a big part of our overall tier 1 in every classroom. And so, yeah, the binder is just a physical representation of some of that work.
That's cool. You mentioned you have some positivity kind of events that help set the culture. What are some examples of those?
Hey, I'll tell you, my favorite and my most trusted way to influence and spread positivity is through fist bumps. I mean, around here, every staff member in the building feels a different way about it, but I know myself and my principal especially, and just some of the office staff that we work with pretty directly around this, is when we're in the hallway, the fist is out, and I mean, I love it. It's a huge bucket filler for me, but one day I did count, and I was getting up to 350 fist bumps in a day. A lot of it, same kids coming back around. It's a really cool thing for us, and it's also it's a way for students to express themselves, because some don't want the fist bump, and that's their connection with you, is they're like, I'm not gonna do it today, But either way, it's an invitation, and it spreads positivity, and that's just the beginning. When it comes to establishing a positive culture, we utilize some other technology that we have. We have this brand new intercom system where we can program music. So every morning there's music to start the day, music to end the day. We don't do traditional bells to signify passing time. We have music in the intercom that signifies, hey, when the music is on, this is when you can be passing classes. It's kind of like musical chairs. When the music is turned off, we don't. We have tons of PBIS ideas from small to big. We have these Stormy Bucks for little quick rewards of positivity. They spend these on Fridays at the Stormy store. But we also do things for, we have a no tardy party. We have a cookie for never playing hooky. We have ice cream on the roll social. So we just look for ways to celebrate, look for things to celebrate. And it's really a mindset, and it's this constant energy that you have to have. And another note that I have in terms of that positivity is, as a building leader, just always making sure that you model that positivity, and you're going to deal with a lot of frustrated staff, frustrated kids along the day. And for me, I'm very intentional about never endorsing negative talk, never endorsing down talk of a kid or down talk of a teacher. So I'm always just trying to shift the conversation for people to see the good in the kid or the good in the situation. And to me, that language piece is key. Making sure as a leader you're always talking positively, and then making sure you're never endorsing negativity and you're always uplifting the positivity.
Yeah, I know in my grant this last year, they're talking a little bit about how to set the tone. And in ninth grade success meetings specifically, they're saying, we always try to pretend like the kid and the parent is in the room. And that really changes the tone for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's talk to Stacey for a second here. Stacey, your work in Issaquah is working to educate staff about how to get ahead of safety issues. And so de-escalation and safety responses, you all use safety care. Can you give me an example of some of the de-escalation training best practices that folks might be able to use right now?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think there's just been a theme that I just want to echo, and our best strategy that we try to tell our staff is just recognizing that our kids are coming into your classroom with a variety of ACEs and background stories and their own belief on their ability to be successful in that class. And we just really want to get to know our students. You know, we believe in asking questions of the previous teacher or their parents or their student, and really identifying, you know, what are your triggers, signals, and reinforcers. So that's something that I think we've heard of a little bit today too, is if we can understand what's that environmental factor that might trigger a student or set them off or have some kind of reaction or big feeling, and try to address that ahead of time. We talk about, I know this is about bullying, but even just like fire alarms or the math assignment, or if there is a peer that they are in conflict with, our schools do a really great job communicating together. You know, how do we not sit them near each other in that classroom, or they shouldn't maybe be lab partners. We can prevent some of the situations, get ahead of it. We also want to know their signals. A lot of time, if we're aware, we can see a change in behavior, or if their head is down, or if they begin to elope around the classroom, they're getting frustrated. What's going on? What can we do to help? And then we also talk about really trying to figure out their reinforcer. What can we offer to try to help change that behavior, or inspire them to make good choices? You know, we talk about a positive adult attention, or yeah, a lot of our schools have the token systems, or maybe they don't want that at all and they want a quiet space and time listening to music. If they do these things, they can earn that reinforcer. And we know just because something works one day, it may change the next day, and we just kind of have to change. But yeah, we really have implemented safety care as our de-escalation strategy, and I'm really proud of that work that we are doing. I can talk a little bit about some practices, and we just remind staff that really what's something that we can control, and our behavior sometimes in the classroom can set students off. So we really talk about avoiding those power struggles. I mean, sometimes our kids are in this fight or flight and they will escalate with you. And so just avoid that power struggle, pick our battles. What is our tone when we're talking to our students? Our body posture, you know, we train our staff to kind of be aware of how you approach students. And really that sarcasm, it does not belong in the classroom. I mean, I have a lot of different roles, and one of my roles is our truancy officer, and we work really hard at talking with the kids to engage them to come back into the classroom. Maybe they've had an experience with bullying, or they've had, you know, life is going on and they weren't engaging or attending classes. So we finally get them to go into that room and they're met with a a comment from a teacher like, "Oh, nice of you to join us today. Look who decided to show up." Ah, and then they kind of just turn around and walk out again. So my advice, sarcasm does not belong in the classroom. The kids really don't, it's not a way to build relationships. When we're talking about building those connections, avoid sarcasm. It would be my advice. And we really talk about our teachers are our best first line of defense. Like you know the kids, you can see a change in behavior. What's going on that maybe they're not reporting, but you are seeing the impact that maybe that incident had. If their heads are down, if they're not turning in assignments all of a sudden, if they are avoiding your class and they've got consecutive absences, check in with them, take a minute and see what's going on. I know we're working on all the ways to report, but also sometimes they need that person to notice. And I think that's part of my role too, is I notice when you're not there. What's going on? What is the barrier? How can we help you? Sometimes it's just a great step that we want our staff to participate in. And with Safety Care, we teach about the help prompt wait strategy of just de-escalating. We know big behaviors happen in the classroom or out in the hallway. You may just come across a situation going on, and we just are trying to walk them down the staircase from really escalated to a place where we can help problem solve. And we learn behaviors communication, right? So we just need to give them tools for how to ask for help or get their needs met in a different way. So we start with help is just asking, we avoid yes or no questions, because if you say, do you need help? The first answer will be no, get away from me. And we just have to recognize and thank them for communicating, and we give them some space and then try again. So avoid yes or no questions, and really just, what's going on? How can I help? And see if they'll engage with us. If not, we offer choices. Do you want to talk with me, or do you want to go talk to a counselor? Two choices that are maybe they would be able to respond to. If they're not engaging in help, then we can prompt, put the book down, walk with me, take a breath, try to help, just give a prompt or something that they will be able to follow. It's not a new skill or task, but maybe then if they will follow a few prompts, they would engage in a conversation to tell us what happened, what is going on, how can I help? And if they're really escalated, we use our wait strategy, just clear the space, make sure all the other students are out of the way, and we wait. And why am I talking? That's the acronym for wait, just to give, we're really bad at pausing and giving kind of process time. So we encourage staff to just give some space. And then we realized we need to train all of our staff on some of these strategies. Our UNs and our one-on-one paras and our LRC2 staff are trained in these de-escalation and our physical management strategies. But what can we do to educate everybody so that we have a common language and understanding? And so we're really excited. We're using our January non-student day to train everybody in Safety Care Basic, which is just like an hour-long PD of de-escalation strategies. So we have a common foundation across our schools, so they know what we're doing when we're trying to engage and de-escalate students. And we also realize we hire our paraprofessionals, monthly. We are hiring, and they sometimes are working with some of our students that escalate. So we've implemented that training as part of their onboarding practice. So looking at our system of support and our tiered professional development, where can we put this information in place to just help everybody? And then as we realize you need to take the 2-day class, they access that in a different way. But we're really proud of it, and it's just makes everybody come together as a team.
That is so cool. As a new teacher, I know I like classroom management is something that takes a lot of finesse. Like you need like really positive examples from people to be able to do that level of work. And I think a lot of times, you know, you get thrown in as a student teacher maybe, and it's like, well, good luck. And you don't actually get to see as much because a good, you know, a really good classroom teacher just creates an environment where like the emotion in the room is really positive, right? And so all the examples that they use are like things that make you feel good, right? And I think that that like emotional contagion part of it too is like, you know, if a teacher's not having a good day, then the kids feel it and then they start to feel kind of yucky too. And so like it's interesting to think about that as far as like bystanders as well. Because, you know, if you have kids who have a conflict going on, and nobody is doing anything about it. Nobody is saying anything about it. And they're just like, yeah, well, meh, you know, like that's just how it feels in this room. That's a totally different thing than like, hey, that's not cool. You do that, you know, that's not how we treat each other. That's a different kind of atmosphere, I think. And when you can empower students to feel that way, and like if the adults know their role in reinforcing that, that just makes such a huge difference. So and I know in Issaquah, you're also trying to be proactive with parents. What does the training for parents look like?
Yeah, what we sorry. HIB is just really emotional, I think, for families. I mean, the
Yeah.
calls that I get, something happened, and we're just trying to help educate our family and our community about what, and I might steal that slide, like what's the difference between peer conflict, just mean behavior, and bullying. And I think it's just something that just, and it's hard because every situation is different. Every we talk about intent versus impact, but what we realized is we needed to just start educating and training our community. So we partnered with our family liaisons and we had a webinar to just explain how do you even report that we have so many different ways of sharing that there's a concern, and we just wanted our families to know that. We realized we had a lot of families new to America. So we were just trying to explain the American school system and how do you navigate, and you are able to set up a meeting with the principal or talk to a teacher directly. Some of our families never experienced that before, and we're in their countries. So that was good learning. And we realized we were using jargon maybe they were unsure of, like, what is a supportive measure? What are interventions? So just explaining before they are in the middle of an incident, what are some of the things available, like the check-in, check-out, like the mentoring, like the, you know, do we need to arrange different walking paths or dismissal times? I think it's just an awareness that we are as a school responding, and we can put things in place to make everybody feel safe and welcome, and just teaching them ahead of time what those are like. We have some families that want to know what we're doing to the aggressor, and they want to know that something has happened and why are they not being expelled, and just educating everyone that what the system that maybe they grew up in, you know, our laws are different now. We don't immediately expel kids. We really do try to educate them and teach them different tools to make different choices in the future. And we can't share what we are doing with another student. We don't do that. And so just explaining that in our education, and it allowed us an opportunity to say, in situations like this, here are possible things that we do. And just because we can't share it with you doesn't mean that we're not acting on it. And I think that's really hard. And even if they report something and we were sharing, if it doesn't meet the definition of HIB, or you know, we find that it didn't violate that regulation, it still falls under inappropriate behavior, and we address it through another student conduct code, and discipline can happen. It just doesn't fit under the definition that they think it should have happened. So just keep the conversation going and letting them know that we really are here to partner together, that all of our goal is to make it a safe place for everyone, but it's really hard and we can't, they want 100% guarantee that this is never going to happen again. And that's hard. Nothing, we just try to say, this is our expectation. This is what we believe. And this is how you continue to report if something is to happen again. We will follow up on that. And we don't, we just want to partner together.
Yeah. Well, and there are like privacy concerns. So you have to be kind of careful about that stuff because you don't want to violate anybody's privacy. I see in the chat, Stacy is asking about, is the training open to all schools? I don't, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I believe that you guys have a contract with them. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. We contract with, we used to have Right Response and then we switched to Safety Care. So we are providing that as, we have trainers that are trained. So only the trainers can go to the buildings to deliver the professional development. So we're figuring out how to do that on January for everybody.
Awesome. And Anne, it looks like we've got a Q&A question. Do you want to read it for us?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you teach adults to be better about discerning what is a volitional response versus an autonomic stress response? I have seen research that replacement behaviors is not possible for stress responses because at this point they are dysregulated, and this is a major issue with trauma, ADHD, and other conditions.
And Stacey, I don't know if you're familiar with words effectively. Volitional response versus autonomic stress response.
I can step into this one if you'd like, if that would be helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Kelly. I'm the Assistant Director of Restorative Practices and Student Discipline with OSPI, and this is something that we work with frequently because one of the other things that we know is when we look at the data, a common component of bullying behaviors is just social skills development. We talked about that a little bit with legging skills. So when we have a student who is trying to maybe engage in building the social capacity of learning how to make friends or play together, but they may be missing that skill. One student perceives that as unwanted attention versus another one that is perceiving it as an attempt to do something. So in a similar way, when we take a look at the ways that we are working to educate adults and how they can educate students about that, just transparently, as an adult with ADHD, the things that have been really, really beneficial in these conversations working with students as well was teaching how that brain science works. Because when we think about some of those stress responses growing up, a lot of the internal language that may have been used was, gosh, why can't I just, or I'm just such a, or the, kind of the self-attacks because we don't understand what's happening. But we know something's happening and we wish we could do better. So I've seen some really phenomenal schools doing this education with students where they're teaching them, the flipped lid, if you've seen that, what part of our brain is in charge when we are escalated versus not, and how we are able to get students back into that escalation, teaching staff that, enable them to understand, oh, that student isn't telling me what's wrong when they're escalated. They can't tell me what's wrong when they're escalated because somebody else is running the show. Emotions is running the show, not logic. So when we teach that to students, sometimes they're able to say, gosh, I'm starting to feel very overwhelmed. I know that some of my tools that we've talked about are, do I need a break? Am I realizing hunger is, I haven't had a snack, I haven't eaten, because that's another part. Sometimes we forget to eat because we're focused. These body responses. And so the more we can teach students that, the more that they're able to self-advocate, but the more they understand each other as well. So one student who may have needed a lot of additional support has been able to say, oh, I am feeling this way, can I please? Or, oh, I see that student over there who is having a really hard time. I bet he's having a tough day. I hope it gets better. And through that common understanding, that other student was back in class the next period, because it wasn't seen as breaking rules. It was seen as, what does my body need to de-escalate? And the students understand it. And there's just great conversations when you walk over to a student and go, hey, are you okay? And they go, I am here. And you go, gotcha. What do you need? Like, they can learn that. And aren't those the skills that we hope for as adults, to be able to, instill and be able to self-regulate? Because whether neurodivergent or not, those are all moments. We all feel stress, we all feel overwhelmed, and they all have an impact on our body and our brains. And so teaching that early, knowing the ways that social media impacts and technology access impacts our brain chemistry and development, we can feel those things differently. Our youth feel those things differently than we may have when we were their age, because they are now having different kinds of stimulants in their world. So these are great conversations. And in short, the more we teach our adults and ask that they teach our students, the more we're able to use common language around brain science versus character and fixed language. It's cool stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, Brianna, you're reminding me of, like, I don't know if you ever did like Kagan training or what have you, but like a lot of it was group work skills, and some of those things of like, this is how you shake someone's hand, this, or fist bump or whatever, you can chicken wing, and just being able to like talk through like some social strategies before you put them in like a situation where they're not going to know who they're talking to, or they're not going to know how to interact, and just like outlining like, we're going to practice some social skills today. This is how you do it. Because I think that anxiety sometimes can fuel those situations too. And so, yeah, it's amazing. I love your response to that question. What a great question. We are going to go on, but let's give our panel a big round of applause. Thank you for preparing and for being here today. We appreciate you so much. And we are going to go on to talk a little bit about some resources next. So let's do that. But first, we hope that your conversation continues outside of this room, and that you bring some ideas that you've heard today out to your leadership team, to the teachers that you're working with, or even lead a discussion with students. Ask them some questions, because an informal focus group is just as helpful as some of those larger surveys. So if your school isn't running a school-wide survey, you talk to the kids that you know. Let's do some resources. And Brianna, did you want to talk a little bit about some of these as well? I know we have a funding document that just got updated. So if you're interested in looking at some potential ways to fund student support at your school, that is such a great resource. We have a newsletter, the Engage newsletter, that goes out each month. And Eric wrote us an awesome article in there this month. And we usually put in a care package as well that has activities for leadership teams that you can check out. And we have some web pages. Brianna, you want to talk about web pages?
Absolutely. First, if you aren't familiar with more of the OSPI site, I know as an educator and an admin, I didn't often go here. And so there's just a plethora of great resources if you are looking for things, because we know you may be looking for supports at various levels within your building, thinking about how you are supporting the proactive and preventative work around behavior, around HIB. And so we have our website that includes on the harassment, intimidation, and bullying webpage under our School Safety Center, just great resources. And again, that great reminder that every district has a HIB compliance coordinator like Stacy. And so if you are unfamiliar with who yours is, you can find that link on our HIB webpage. There are just a number of wonderful resources available, and you heard some of those during Caroline's speak, and during if you are able to download the resources page. Two of the big ones we wanted to highlight were some of our websites like stopbullying.gov, where they have a number of resources, whether you're looking for social media campaigns or you're looking for things to teach staff, or ways to incorporate lessons with students or parents. So just using those resources that already exist. And then you heard Eric also mention the Center on PBIS. They have a bullying prevention focus and just really wonderful resources that are available on there. So please take a look at the resources page. It is in the chat a few times, and I will also put a link to the QR code if you're interested in signing up for the district office hours that we offer related to all things student safety, and HIB is just one of those topics.
Thanks, Brianna. We also have staff at OSPI who are happy to help you, of course. So you can always email us as well. Next month, we're going to talk about how to empower students and families with varying immigration status. We have a special guest from Washington State University. So we'll hope to see you here next month. We're going to talk a little bit about graduation and some resources for that as well. We have an evaluation, so I'm gonna put that here. Let's see, that's launched now. You can check that out. We have a feedback survey also. So if you're joining us live today, it'll launch right after the webinar, but it's also available on our webinar page. So your feedback does so much for us because we just take your great ideas and try them out. So each month we have little adjustments that have totally been brought on by your great ideas, and we so appreciate you sharing ideas for speakers and things that we can try. So thank you so much for participating with that. We'd love to see you get some clock hours for joining us. So if you're live, you've already registered for the year through Zoom. You'll also need to register for clock hours monthly with PD Enroller. PD Enroller will send you an evaluation to your email, and then we verify your attendance and we release your hours. And I'm probably tiring Lori out. I'm sorry, Lori. I'm too fast. If you're watching the video later, our process changes a little bit. You can fill out our feedback survey to signal that you've watched, and we register you for the clock hours in PD Enroller. PD Enroller is going to email you that evaluation, and then once that's complete, we release your clock hours, and usually it's every 2 weeks or so. And if you have questions about this, you can email Ronnie Larson. She does have clock hours. And thanks again for joining us today. And we will see you next month.